Yeah, so I think this is gonna be like a pretty casual conversation again. Yeah, I want to start with the funding side, like better
Yeah.
SFF.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I gave you the rough summary the other day. Roughly, I'm thinking that would be good for there to be like a funding, like some kind of system that's around that people can distribute money through that requires less trust, is less bottlenecked on like building your own foundation, has access to like a substantial amount of deal flow that is present. Like historically, built the survival and built the S process and collaborate a lot of SFF in building that. I'm generally very proud of the work that we did here. My current best guess is like SFF is kind of like has been risk averse and kind of opinionated about what kind of grants they allow being made and various things like this that kind of like prevents it from really coming to fruition.
And when you say like SFF has, that's like the management team of SFF,
That's
kind
right.
of.
I mean, it's like, there's like a small board. It's like Critch, Ethan, and Eric, Rockstead. Yeah, and they like, they run the thing, but like they have a lot of opinions about like they recently had like a policy where like if you do anything that like remotely looks like advocating for violence or like have tell jokes in which a fictional character advocates for violence, like then you are banned forever from receiving SFF money. And it was like, oh god, these kinds of rules just like end up being like used for like a huge amount of just like chilling effects and end up like a huge amount of like annoying political prosecution, and it just like makes me like quite worried about the future of the fund.
Yeah. Maybe one way I would try to frame it, perhaps, is that when I first heard of the SFF, I was like, oh, this beautiful thing where lots of different people with lots of different opinions can like, collaborate kind of together, but also like fund specific things that they like themselves. And that's what, in my view, what the recommenders of the S process and also the like speculator grantors of the S process are empowered to do. But you're also saying a little bit like, even though there's this kind of beautiful schematic, in practice, the people organizing the S process have like a lot of say, and that kind of shapes what
That's right.
happens.
And like there's like a lot of opinionated constraints. It's just like, well, the application is like extremely difficult and confusing to fill
Yeah.
out. And I've been trying to fix the application for years and I can't. And it's just silly. Like it's just like it's a huge like bottleneck on like getting good people to have the ability to get money via the process.
Yeah.
And there's just like these kind of procedural commitments that don't really make sense to me.
So I applied for SFF in the most recent round for Mana Fund. Mox applied on behalf of Mox. And also a lot of people I kind of knew came to me and was like, oh, can Mana Fund be the fiscal sponsor for this? And they did it. So I guess I have a fair amount of experience with the application from the applicant side. And yes, it is the most complicated application process I've
That's right.
ever.
I've never seen any. It's like also like complicated and like completely random reasons. It's like you have to give this answer. Like they are free forms. You have to fill it into the Google Doc. You have to fill it into the general application. And then also whenever you fill out the general application, if you forget this, you can't get a grant. You have to fill out a speculation grant application, which asks you why you need money quickly, which
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense because you don't need money quickly, but you have to fill out the application because if you don't get a speculation grant, you're not eligible for the main round. And you're like,
Suffice to say that the grantee experience has many aspects that could be improved upon even just filling out the application. Yeah, I think there are some things that the SFF, when I look at it, do quite well, actually, which is one, it makes like unrestricted grants, which I very much appreciate. Paul Graham has a great write-up on like why to give unrestricted. And I think the like speculation grants do come like relatively quickly, which
that's
is
right.
nice.
But I mean, that was the big thing that actually pushed me over the edge on doing this, where SFF just blocked all speculation grants to all advocacy organizations.
I see.
And that was a huge deal because, like, these organizations were all relying on the speculation grants. Where, like, the whole point of a speculation grant system is that, like, the speculation grantors can, like, ensure
Mhm.
grantors so that they're not reliant on the very slow turnaround time of the S process. And what happened this round was just like there's like 25 organizations that just like were told that they were going to get the money basically via the process as is, and then they were like, oh no, sorry, this is not okay. Like we don't want this to be part of the speculation grant process.
And just for like, can you like share some numbers if you're allowed to on how like much maybe total money was given through the speculation grants and how much people are expecting for the final round?
I mean, I think probably the number of the grants that have been delayed, my guess is around 6 million total or 5 million total or something like that.
Speculation grants.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe less. Maybe it's only 3 million. Can't be that much less. Like I know of a single grant that's 500K and there's a few other ones. So yeah, something between 3 and 6 million
Sure.
or 10 million.
And historically, the rounds themselves are like 20 million
That's right,
approximately.
something like that.
Yeah. Okay, so you saw this, you're like, okay, maybe you want to do something better.
Yeah,
And I imagine you also want to kind of get like other funders besides just Jan himself
that's right.
involved in like creating, like participating, putting their funds,
That's
selecting like recommenders, that kind of thing.
That's right. I mean, the thing that I really like is I just really want to make it so that like, if you're someone who wants to give away money, like whether it's Dustin, whether it's someone like who is at the labs and has a bunch of equity or something like that, that like there's a process that they can join where you can observe what would happen if you were to give money to it. You can like show up, you can see the applications, you can see the organizations, you can be like, what would happen if I were to distribute $2 million for this process?
Okay.
You get to you get to see yourself what the result of this be, who you're deferring to, what they have said about the relevant applications,
Okay.
and then as you know, basically it's the last step. You get to decide how much money to distribute, which like is a much lower trust system than the default situation with a foundation, where you're like, I want to make a big foundation. That one wants to have an endowment. I need to like think about who to hire permanently. I built these relationship with these organizations who I'm also forming all of this stuff, which I think is just like a truly terrible experience if you want to make it easy to do philanthropy.
Sure.
Um,
That's interesting. Actually, I wasn't even aware of this is how the SFF S process work. And incidentally, I think I'm like maybe one of the top 1,000 people in the
That's
world
right.
who cares about like funding processes.
Correct.
And still, the fact that SFF I don't quite understand is like
Yeah, I
a
mean,
little bit like
the
concerning to me.
marketing has been really not very, I mean, Critch has been doing a good job, like having a few explanations, like in YouTube form and stuff like that. But just like, yeah, I mean, it's like ideally I mean, they now have like a demo app you can play around with. But I think a huge issue with the S process is just like making the marketing clear and understandable and like being clear about the value propositions,
Yeah.
not just the mechanisms.
Yeah,
It's like, yes, somebody could have derived the fact that you are allowed to go last as the funder, and this gives you a kind of assurance. But like having someone to be like, hey, look, man, if you join this process, you get to know where your money goes before you spend it in a way that's very difficult to achieve via almost any other way of giving away your money. It's just like a thing that you can tell people.
Can you explain like just a bit more about how that works? So I had imagined that the way the S process works is like you pick out some recommenders and you give the recommenders the money and the recommenders decide how to spend that money.
Yeah.
So
The key thing is more that you work from the bottom up. You start out with, you have the applications, then you have the recommenders, and recommenders specify a funding ordering over the organizations. So each recommender says, here's the order in which I would fund these organizations. This the organization I would give my first $10,000 to, and I would give $10,000 to this one. Then I think probably the first one is the good one, then I would want to give to the third one. So they all specify a funding ordering. And the whole point is that they specify funding ordering over a relatively wide range of money, because they like, they might get different amounts of money flooded through them. And also, if other recommenders and other recommenders want to fund the same organizations, they want to make sure that like that, therefore, if things get bumped later into their funding ordering, they get to go all the way to that point. And then the funders come in and they are like, oh, okay, now I get to decide in what order I want to distribute my money to the recommenders. But that means that like there's a final slider at the end where the funder gets to be like, oh, okay, do I want to go $1 million into my funding recommendation over the recommenders, or do I want to go $2 million or $3 million or $0? Like you can just see what grants get made if you give a marginal $1 million to it. And because everyone has specified funding orderings, this allows you to just simulate what happens. And this is like where the name S process comes from. It's a simulation process. It's like you just simulate what would happen if you were to distribute an additional $1 million, and you get to see the counterfactual right there.
is the funder who's like deciding whether to commit the next $1 million like trying to figure out what allocation between the recommenders to give those $1 million to? Or
I mean, they have some tools. Like ultimately, basically they're just like, you can decide which recommenders you want to give your next $1 million to. And then you can see what the recommenders would spend those $1 million on.
Okay.
And you can like, you can just choose like whether you want like how much and which different recommenders you're happy with if you distribute money through them. And I think it's like very valuable to the system that the funder moves last, where like one of the things, for example, that a funder does is like the funders like get to log in and they get to see like who has done good reasoning, you want to really avoid certain kinds of gaming where like people avoid ranking an organization highly because they expect other people to fund, like other recommenders to recommend to them first. And so you want the funders to take some responsibility for like checking where anyone is gaming the system and then not trying to distribute money through them. And so like it's really useful and valuable if the funder goes last, but this also means that like it's easy for the funder to pull out at the end and be like, okay, I thought I was going to give $2 million through it, but now seeing actually the recommenders, like in the quality of their reasoning and stuff like that, I'm either pulling out completely or I'm only going to give $200K.
Sure. Maybe in my head, the like kind of like perfect ideal, or at least the thing that I would try to design from first principles maybe would be something a bit more like impact cert like, or something a bit more like standard VC equity like, where like the LPs kind of are funding like funds that then fund like specific projects, and then like every once in a while the maybe like LPs, the Dustins and the like Anthropic donors decide like, oh, based on the performance of these funds or the like specific like set of charities these like funds are funding, which ones we want to give money to. In some ways, it seems pretty similar to the S process as described.
Yep.
Yeah,
I mean,
maybe.
I think basically, indeed, like this is basically just like you have a recommender. I'm not at all attached in the system for a recommender to be a person as opposed to a team. So it's very reasonable for a recommender to be a person.
Yeah, but my understanding is currently the recommenders are all individual people, but
Well, like there are some weird edge cases. Like there exists an AI recommender that's been in every round, and there exists a mean recommender, which is just a recommender that is the like averages the utility functions of everyone in the in a process, or like averages the implicit utility functions of everyone in a process. And that's like a thing that kind of is an interesting thing you could decide to defer to, and that's not necessarily a person.
where do you think what were like your biggest constraints on getting this done built?
I mean, the biggest thing right now is actually just trying to communicate what it is. Like I think the S process, like it's like, is it a process? What on earth does it mean to participate in the S process? Like generally my biggest bottleneck right now is like finding a good framing and name of what it is. Like, is it a platform? Is it a market?
Yeah, I
And,
suggested
like,
exchange earlier.
as like exchange.
Maybe.
I think the exchange really leans into like the impact certificate type thing, which I think is like has some good attributes, but I think it's just like trying to cross a lot of inferential steps in one big pile. Yeah, so I think like trying to figure out what a good communication is that is in particular like centrally focused on trying to help funders, like kind of trying to help donors and like philanthropists understand what a product is. Well, like I'm very happy about the Lightspeed Grants Round, which like we started a while ago, but Lightspeed Grants Round is just like, very oriented around communicating that it's going to be a good experience to the grantee,
Sure.
which is like not a priority I have right now, where I really want to get to a point where it can communicate the benefits of it to the funders.
Yeah, and I have some sense that like if you do the classic startup-y things, like start with like a small round and like run more rounds down the line, that kind of shows the work.
That's right.
Then people are gonna be like, oh well, cool, I could like commit like a small amount of money, or just commit virtual money to this, just see what would happen. Like participate without even having committing anything except time. Time, to be clear, is like a big commitment, but and then maybe you could get people understanding this better. Cool. Do you have a sense of like when tentatively you might be able to do the first?
I mean, right now I'm just like, I'm writing up the Google Doc. I'm hoping to send it over to funders who might be interested in participating. And then I'm hoping that I can do something in August. Like that would be ideal if like we open applications a bit earlier than that. Like ideally I would like to get applications done in, mid-July would be ideal. Like if we can do a public launch mid-July, get applications, maybe even figure out where we can somehow get get a bunch of the applications that have gone to a long-term future fund and go to the SFF, so we can like maybe even start earlier than that, and then having the first dispersed grant round in August would be ideal.
And do you have a sense of like how many dollars would be like sweet spot? Or
I think for the first round, I think something like 10 million would be pretty good. It's just like it's a substantial amount of money that like I think solidifies this as a real institution, but isn't like going all in some super intense way.
And then probably from there, like regular rounds, do you think like half a year?
I think quarterly is, currently so there's a balance that I'm currently a bit uncertain about, which is what do you want to balance to be between the round evaluation mechanisms and speculation grantors?
Okay.
So like right now the SFF runs once a year.
Right.
But that's less bad than it sounds because the speculation grantors get to distribute a decent amount of money like outside of the round. And then they get evaluated retroactively.
Actually, that even wasn't that obvious to me. It's not obvious to me that like, somebody applying right now would have a good chance of getting like $50,000 maybe if they had a good project.
That's right. Yeah, they could just get it immediately to speculation grantors.
Sure.
And so there's kind of a buffer here, but I still think that like the annual process is really very slow and very heavy, and it's just like as a funder a pretty terrible experience because like you only get to get one round a year that you get to decide how to distribute the money. So I think currently I want to do quarterly, and then my best guess is like as things go crazy and crazier as a result of like AI taking off and various other things, I'm expecting that I would want to shorten that, and eventually like probably more like a monthly settlement of just like things get evaluated once a month, and we make it easy for you to like maintain like
a rolling application.
Like have a rolling application, and also as a funder make it easy to be like like copy over your like how you had preferences over recommenders from last round and then adjust them maybe a bit, as opposed to being like starting from scratch every time.
Sure. Yeah, one of my favorite sayings, like if it hurts, do it more. which is like an agile kind of saying, like,
Yeah, that makes sense.
usually around like, merging in code or something like that.
That's right.
But yeah, if the funding thing kind of hurts and is
That's
painful,
right.
if you do it more, you'll be forced to
Do
make
it
it better.
more
You know?
feedback. That's right.
Yeah, my current sense actually is that like being a recommender is also like quite painful because you have to like read like hundreds of
I
applications
mean,
and
the most insane thing that I just absolutely don't understand is that like SFF really wants every recommender to read every application.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, that is insane. Why would you do that? Most of these are like random ass LLM slop, but nobody should read them. Like, I just don't understand. Just like, please, recommenders should pay attention, and it should make sense for recommenders to get to like specialize in certain domains and
Sure.
be like, look, man, I don't know how to evaluate this weird biodefense stuff. Like, I'm not going to look at those. I'm not interested in that. I want to focus on a certain kind of domain where they have expertise. It just doesn't make any goddamn sense that all of them need to evaluate all of them. And this is like one of those procedural commitments that just like makes the marketing of the S process much, much harder.
Yeah, I totally agree for what it's worth. That doesn't make any sense to me either. Did you want to say anything about other funders, particularly CG, Longview, or Mana Fund?
Yeah. I mean, I think the big thing is just like, I think like philanthropy is one of the most cursed games in existence. I'm just like you have people who like they probably via entrepreneurship, sometimes via investing, like amass a huge amount of money that like they've paid a lot of attention to of like how they grew it, like what they did with it. And now the usual thing is then they're like, oh, and now I want to do something good with that money. And they have not much ability to, like they don't want to pay that much attention to exactly what is happening with it. They're usually busy with other projects. And now they're trying to hire someone to like hand all of their wealth to distribute it to a set of projects that are hard to evaluate and where the metrics are much less legible than market feedback and stuff like that. And this principal agent problem is just like extremely difficult. Like the default outcome of what happens when rich people try to do philanthropy is that they like think about starting a foundation. They imagine hiring someone like on the market for this and be like, who am I going to show up and then feel comfortable and trusting most of my net worth to? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Sure.
And so the thing that they then often do is they basically make a family office. Like, they're just like, well, the only way I can solve this principal agent problem is like, I need to choose someone where I like have a very strong pre-existing relationship with, that for some reason I know that like they're not going to just like try to extract as much money as possible, or like try to even just extract 5% of my money, which will turn out to be many millions of dollars. And that's just like that trust bottleneck is just very intense. And I just think that like neither CG, like I mean CG historically did something that I thought was very good, where I think like Holden kind of like built an institution at GiveWell where he was like, we are going to like, you know, that you can distribute money through us because we're going to be extremely transparent. We're going to be like evaluating these things in a way where you can follow our reasoning and you can see our receipts. Yeah. And like we have this very intense commitment that like we are going to give money away on the basis of cost effectiveness. Like we're going to figure out what the most cost effective grants are that like can help the world the most, and we're going to give money to that. And like over many years, they built kind of a reputation of being an entity that like you can trust to distribute money based on a basis of cost effectiveness. And I think that is like one of the things that then like enable Dustin to trust him and put him in a position to like distribute a much larger amount of money via open fill and coefficient giving. But I just think they've now, as far as I can tell, largely abandoned that as like the central project. Like now when you talk to like CG, they're like, oh yeah, a huge amount of what we're going to give away from is like stuff that puts us in a better position to attract future funders, like stuff that like is oriented around protecting and maintaining the brand and reputation of our funders.
Okay.
And like those things are just like, they put you into much more of this principal agent category of like, you now have like, you don't have this clear commitment to like evaluate things in cost effectiveness. You very rarely have any kind of inspectable public write-ups that like people can cross-check and people know kind of check out on its own. And I think they're just going to be thrown into the midst of like a lot of the classical principal agent problems, and the forces of that are like pretty messy. And I think Longview kind of never even tried. I think they're just like trying to do the same of just like being an institution that somehow builds like such a strong trust relationship with its funders that it can overcome this principal agent problem. And I'm not that optimistic about it. I think historically they've like been extremely limited in like what kind of grants they can make, because just like they really need to select from a subset of grants that like is like credible and legible looking in a way that just like often gets rid of 99% of the impact. Like I think there have been very few Longview grants I've been excited about historically.
I mostly agree. I'm very confused why it seems like the Anthropic default, or like among the like set of Anthropic employees who have liquidity in this kind of like current status, are planning on giving it mostly to Longview. I don't know.
I mean, I'm just like, what's the alternative? Like that's the big question. It's just like, what else are they going to do? But I do also think that just like partially it's just kind of a con in the sense of like a lot of EAs are giving strong endorsements of Longview because they're worried that otherwise the money will not go to charity at all. And so just like they are willing to say things like these are amazing advisors, like these like are really trustworthy people. When I think the right answer is something like that, hey, I think these people like this is a really, really cursed problem. Like there's a decent chance that like these people will be in a really, really difficult position where like they will be very tempted to like recommend you grants that like sound good to you when you think about it a tiny bit so they can get more money from you and then they can use that to like establish more of a reputation. And there's like this whole parallel game. And like, I think these people are probably going to give you better advice than like other people who are also in this cursed problem class. But to be clear, this is all very cursed, and you should view these people with like a lot of suspicion because just like this is one of the most difficult principal agent problems that exist out there. But it's just like not what people are saying. People are just like, these people are extremely trustworthy and great, and like you should give them your money. And I think there's just like a thing going on where just like people want to make that recommendation because they're worried that otherwise it's not going to go to charity at all. And I just really don't think that's a good thing to do. And so I'm currently expecting that like a lot of Anthropic employees will be pretty burned in a year or two. When like they are experiencing these dynamics, it becomes very clear that a huge amount of grants are never presented to them because like people are worried that they will find them weird. People will see it as like a lot of politics behind the scenes about which grants get put in front of you and stuff like that. People will see it as like a lot of weird reputational management around like, wait, why I can't make this grant because another funder would be angry at me if like angry at you if you made this grant. That's really not what I want. I just,
Yeah. In some sense, I myself am not like that worried about the way money plays out in this year, and more worried about how like funding plays out in the next year and the year after that.
that's it. I think like this year, I think everyone will struggle to just like give money to anything, and like a lot of things will be spinning out, and I don't think we're going to see a huge, enormous amount of funding being distributed, like in the bank account. I think we might see quite a lot of funding committed, but I think very little is going to get distributed. But then, like the following year and after that, I'm pretty worried about how that will play out.
Especially with like an IPO, perhaps, or yeah, things like that. I heard some like crazy numbers. I don't know like how much you endorse this. Somebody was like, yeah, it was maybe something like $100 million this year, and then 100x that next year, and 100x that the year after that.
I think the second 100xing sounds tricky, but the first 100xing sounds genuinely plausible to me. Yeah, 10 billion. That seems very plausible to me.
Cool.
I think 1 trillion less plausible.
Yeah, I guess then like things about how like Anthropic itself as an OpenAI and other things.
That's right.
And yeah, maybe we can switch over and talk a little bit about incubating projects. Yeah.
I mean, you've been like, okay, you would like to see more interesting like infrastructure, software, like stuff that like people with, an altruistic mission in mind try to build to make the world a better place. And you've been thinking about running a fellowship of some kind or something.
Yeah, I would maybe call it an incubator, not a fellowship at this point, to like be a little bit closer to Y Combinator than to Matt's, perhaps, in the like seniority or the kinds of outcomes that we're hoping for. But yes, software fellowship. I think the three main categories of things I'm interested in are one would be like AI for epistemics and coordination, which is a kind of a cursed, title, but like broad class of things that are using the LLM capabilities to help like individual humans or groups of humans or society as a whole, like reason better, think better, work together better. Second category would be just like public facing content, stuff like AI 2027, or perhaps like an 80,000 hours or a Blue Dot. These are all like sites that take kind of information that people in our community have like thought about for a while and try to disseminate them more widely. Third category would be more like internal facing infrastructure. So, I mean, even this new like better S process would be an example, but historically like LessWrong, ManaFund, and other kinds of like internal coordination type things. So these are three categories of projects that like I think I could help out a lot with. Yeah. I'm open to other like software projects. I'm open to even non-software projects. I've done stuff like Manifest or Mox, which are not super software shaped.
Yeah.
But
I mean, we made our conference largely as an app.
I think that's one way to think about it, though I think it's like mostly not true.
I mean, of course, the people and the branding matters a lot, but I do think like frequently, like when we encountered a problem that like I had at other conferences, I was like, how can I solve this with software as opposed to like grit?
And I think that's a very like good like instinct to lean into, and also especially easier now that like vibe coding is so good. And yeah, some of my thesis about why do this like incubator now is that vibe coding is so good. So many kinds of people who previously experienced problems can now just go like hack and solve themselves. And one like pointer to this is maybe like Ayla with like Glosso.inc. Like, in years past, I think Ayla's like worked on other kinds of projects that had some of the same ideas, but being able to like execute on it herself, I think makes it much better. So
So I think one of the things that is most interesting about the thing you're trying to do is you're trying to do this project, but you're also trying to take equity in the organizations, or at least in as much as that is possible. Like, have you figured out how to do that? Like, many of these people will maybe want to do it as a charity. Are you going to encourage people to like incorporate it as an LLC explicitly, not as a charity? Like, how are you thinking about structuring that right now?
Yeah, and maybe explicitly as a C corporation, not an LLC, whether a standard C corporation or a PVC, just because those are have better like
Yeah.
investor standard terms. Yeah, I think some of it is just going to be in the launch announcement. We're going to say like we're looking for profits for these reasons. The reasons, very briefly, being like many kinds of like for profits like encounter more what should we call it feedback from reality because they're like trying to get revenue and like then you have to generate some value for the world compared to many kinds of like nonprofit that are like research oriented or like vaguely community building. I think it was a great thing, when like EAG started charging people for tickets because it like at least grounds some amount of value that EAG is providing, that kind of thing. And yeah, then a second reason why for profits now is looking at the huge torrent of funding coming up. Like probably some of these dollars will end up like in like nonprofits, but the nonprofits themselves are going to like need a lot of tooling and like infrastructure and like services that like can be sold to them by for profits. And I think like in that ecosystem, it will be probably better if the orgs, whatever the orgs are charging each other for like what seems like fair value, as opposed to just like everyone kind of like being like kumbaya, holding hands, giving everything away for free. Just money helps solve coordination problems at scale.
I agree.
Yeah, so for those reasons, I guess I think for profits seem quite good. Some things that like maybe donors don't often appreciate about nonprofits, like or 501c3 dollars, is that 501c3 dollars can go towards for profits in order to like buy services,
Absolutely.
and nonprofits can invest in for profits. That's the thing that Manifund actually does a lot. We often help like donors like Julian's Astoff put money into like a new as like a seed investment into a new like,
Oh, great.
for profit.
Nice.
So
Yeah, so you are planning for the entity that runs this to be a nonprofit or for profit? Have you figured that out yet?
tentatively, the entity that runs this will be Manifund, so it will be a nonprofit, which means that hopefully we can fundraise from, like 501c3 dollars. The standard thing that Manifund does when we're like putting investments into for profits is that we just like kind of like hold money on behalf of the donor, like a standard donor buys fund.
Yeah,
Actually,
cool. So basically,
yeah,
treat more like a donor advised fund.
yeah,
That seems
yeah.
pretty reasonable.
And then if the donor, if there's an exit scenario, then the donor gets more money to invest into new like charitable entities or other. Yeah,
Yep, other donations.
Yeah.
That's great. That's kind of reasonable. There's like two things that I think I'm most uncertain about for the project. One of them is something like, what is the kind of person you actually most want? I think like this has always been like a big, like it feels to me that there's like three big cultural anchors that like all do really just produce like very different kinds of projects. And I'm like, you have like the very impact motivated people who are going to be like, I want to do, like, I'm here because I want to do as much altruistic good as possible. You're going to have the YC people that like you want to attract because they're mostly there for entrepreneurship. And I think you're like very sympathetic to being like, oh, maybe we just want some people who are here like, oh, I can provide infrastructure to like a bunch of the entropic people who will be extremely rich. I don't care about any of this like impact stuff, but if I can get rich helping people, I'll gladly do it. And then you also have like a bunch of the rationalists who are like there and are going to be like thinking a lot about AI epistemics, thinking a lot about like how we can use these systems to reason better. And I guess I'm like, whenever I'm imagining this fellowship, I'm just like, I don't know where you're going to end up in. Like, this feels like one of the core tensions. And also is going to like determine like how much synergy is there going to be between the people. If like, will they actually successfully like cooperate, gain value from each other?
Yeah. I don't really have a good answer to that. I kind of think there's a lot of things I respect about all three communities. I would like try to market the incubator as much as I can to people in all these communities, and probably expect people who do well in this incubator to be kind of like the like intersection of like some combination of these three communities. I'm hopeful that it's like a large enough intersection that I can at least find like 10 people in the world who are feel like they're excited by startup-y things and rationalist-y things and like impact EA, safety things. Yeah, so that's some of the hope that like the question that I'm asking by like launching this thing. Yeah, I kind of expect that like different people will like be more strongly tied into some of these communities. My current expectation is that I'll have a harder time finding good people from the startup land to kind of participate in this. Maybe because like YC offers like more money than I have to offer, and YC is like much more well known, kind of like the Harvard. I'm hoping that like I can attract some of them by maybe being like this is more like OG YC, the kind of like intimate, small, like 10-person cohort with like a lot of really good people. I think like currently as a digression, like YC does not get the best founders because they kind of see the like 200 or 500 or however big YC batches are nowadays, that thing to be kind of like a more, I don't know, like
Commoditized?
Commoditize, yeah, that's a good word for it. Like process. So I'm really hoping that like some of the like best founders of the generation who are even just like not even that like AI safety pill or whatever will still look at this thing and like be that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and also like if in as much as you can do a thing where you're like, oh no, this is going to have a much higher density of interesting people. Like because YC is 200 companies, you're like, how interesting is the average founder I'm going to find here? And you can be like, no, look, man, we're going for like it's going to be. I guess how many people are you currently imagining like to participate in this cohort?
Yeah, probably like between 10 and 20 founders. Yeah.
Cool. Oh, 10, 20 founders in total. So that would be, in as much as you want teams to apply, more like 5 to 10,
Yeah,
5 to
more
6
like 5 to 10 orgs. I don't know what the breakdown of like solo founders versus co-founders will be. Yeah. Yeah, but that's my sense of like what the original YC size was as well. A lot of my like constraints are, or not necessarily constraints, but like I'm trying to like copy the homework of OG YC.
Very reasonable.
Yeah. Well, one kind of question that I was thinking might be interesting is like, would Gwern, for example, be a good founder for this thing?
Yeah.
And maybe you've also seen that he recently like wrote this thing about guardian angels.
I mean, I was reading it yesterday, so it's still on my list to read.
Yeah, guardian angels is kind of like digital twins, like the idea of creating an LLM shaped system that tries to be you as much as possible, as opposed to be like an assistant that is helpful for you. So I think it's an interesting concept. I would be personally very excited if Gwern wanted to like work on his idea in my incubator. But yeah, like Gwern or something like Gwern, like is that kind of like writer person now a good fit for founding because vibe coding is easy, et cetera, et cetera?
Oh, that's really interesting. It's true. Like there's a sense in which, I mean, it's like there's been a joke that's been going on ever since the start of the of LLMs being even able to remotely code, which is like, is the idea guy going to take over Silicon Valley? Of just like maybe ideas are the only thing that matters. I don't currently believe in it. Do you think like you really need the iteration? You need to be able to talk to the users. They will still just be like tons and tons of like drudge work, and a huge amount of advantage will be like the willingness to get through that drudge work. But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, my current, the other thing I would like currently try to index for when I'm looking for founders, like, people like me, people like you, people who kind of have had the experience of building, but also like in these communities,
I think one of the things that I at least understand is like for the second category that you mentioned about like public communications, that one feels like currently the odd one out when I think about it. It's just like, how are you going to make money? Like, there's really like those lines. Like, look, I ran AI 2027, but of course we made $0 from that. Maybe we've been thinking about selling the movie rights to it. It's plausible. There's this, like, I think you can squeeze $100,000 of those movie rights. It's a surprisingly popular like media entity, but also do you want to? Like, seems like it's
Yeah, I agree. This seems kind of hard. I mean, like, there's some kind of like ideal world where we have your like new great funder system that is like happy to like retroactively pay back people to do good projects, and then
interesting.
So
that does seem it is like in a world where you could potentially get a bunch of money from writing, which like that's proportional to like the influence that you get and like the importance that it plays in the world. That could be a huge shift and would make that more possible.
But to ask people to like work on a startup, like building that is kind of like you're like building a bridge to nowhere, maybe or maybe someplace really like with a lot of gold. But it is very speculative. I do agree that the public comms category is kind of the least monetizable in some sense, or easy to figure out how to get to revenue. Also, obviously, there's like lots of like things about like if you have information you want to disseminate it freely.
Yeah,
I think there are some, I mean, like business models that do work. If you look at like specific writers, like maybe Bern Hobart, for example, he like puts out a lot of like free information, some amount of paid information.
Interesting. I mean, like a Substack as a startup is not crazy. Like some of the Substacks are like, I think we've never seen $1 billion Substack, but we are now in a range of seeing $10-20 million Substacks.
Yeah. I don't quite know yet if just like a Substack writer. Maybe we should just have really good Substack writers in the cohort. I don't really know, but that's possible to me actually. Yeah, but then also if you look at things like like ADK, I think there's room for something like an ADK or a Blue Dot to make money as like a recruiting service. I actually think one of the like major holes in the like ecosystem where there's like lots of money like flowing around is finding good talent to kind of like hire when your org has a bunch of money but like nobody to hire. So I would kind of encourage maybe like orgs like Blue Dot or Mats or ADK to kind of think about like, if you already have kind of like a pipeline and you're helping place people, can you ask the orgs to pay you money every time you place a person, that kind of thing. And I see you grimacing and like,
it's very tricky because like
Obviously.
the whole value proposition of ADK is to be like, I'm going to tell you what the most impactful thing to do is, and now suddenly you have this huge conflict of interest of like, well, maybe the most impactful thing doesn't pay you the most. And so
like you don't want the fail state of like, oh, they're always placing people at Frontier Labs because OpenAI and Thoughtbank did the most for those like positions. I agree, but I don't know. I remain like
I'm just like you got to capture some fraction of the value you provide somehow. And I think like that will always involve some amount of compromise with like, it'll always create suboptimal incentives because capturable value tends to very rarely be the full value. But I still think like you need to do it, otherwise you don't get to exist.
Yeah, I mean, maybe at some point, a good thing, like for me, maybe to do as well, if you'd like, is to kind of like write down like different funding models. Like, how does Manifest make money? How does Lighthaven make money? Because I think there are like two examples of models that like actually do in fact like have non-obvious business models, but like kind of like work out and what goes into like making those work. So, that's my hope for the like second category. But yeah, fundamentally, I agree. It's going to be hard to make a lot of money on those, perhaps.
Yeah. And you're currently imagining, I think it was like 2 months,
Probably 3 months. Yeah, starting late July. I was about to like launch today, and then Mythos or Cloud Fable came. I was like, bad day to launch. Maybe I'll try to launch tomorrow
bad day to launch. I got to redo my launch website with Mythos
as well.
It's like this is cheapest alpha sitting on the ground right now.
Yeah. I'm curious if you had any thoughts on like things that you would personally look for if you were joining an incubator. I gather this is how you
interesting.
would do.
Yeah, let me think about it.
Yeah.
The thing that I've always wanted out of YC, and that seemed most interesting to me, is it is very clear to me that like routinely my organization is just like facing like extremely important decisions.
Sure.
And I often just feel like, I have friends, I have other people, but just like it seems to me that many times like the thing, like it seems to me it's a kind of problem that many other people have faced of like core decisions about like, well, maybe we want to scale up a lot, we want to hire a lot, how do I make that not destroy my organization? Like complicated negotiation dynamics where like I would genuinely be quite interested in like talking to a bunch of people who have been through YC or have dealt with VC stuff to like help me understand like how do they do negotiation with funders and stuff like that, or just like I think just like there's a lot of norms and things there that seem very helpful to understand. Not norms, but just like matters of like how do these negotiations work. And I think like that kind of like high stakes business advice like has felt to me like a thing that's just very hard to get otherwise. I mean, maybe I can post more frequently on Twitter, but often like this is stuff that's just like very hard to like talk about publicly and hard to navigate. So I think that's one of the things that has attracted me always most to YC, of just like having access to people who've just like seen a bunch of shit in business. And then I can go to them and be like, hey, I have this like huge, enormous conflict between two of my employees. Like it's threatening to tear apart the organization. This has never happened to me, but like I've seen it to happen to other organizations. And I'm like, how would you navigate that? Like, what would you do? Like getting advice from people who have navigated those kinds of really tricky situations.
That's really interesting. I kind of see you as like a big fish in a small pond in some sense, where like I think lots of people currently go to you for advice. I remember like recently, I think somebody on the board of Manifest asked you about like a related-ish question, right? And yeah, I guess I hadn't thought, but like it totally makes sense that you would want to get advice from like people who have seen even bigger scales of problems.
Yeah, and I think especially as a CEO, like there's a thing that I've heard from lots of people in my CEO, which is like it's pretty common for CEOs to have other CEO friends that like are often like comparably strong to their relationships within their organization, just because CEOs face similar problems and they just like really care about. It's very hard to have someone else who understands the kind of issues it's just like a CEO faces if they're not facing that, have ever faced that themselves. And just like being having more access to a community of CEOs just like seems very valuable to me. Just like the vast majority that I get to talk with are just like they're researchers. They're like, and I know 5 CEOs, like it's not that many.
I mean, I kind of wonder if like there are enough big-ish organizations in the like AI safety space that you could like pull together, like I don't know, Beth Barnes and like, the Apollo people or something like that, and then get some kinds of answers to some of the questions. I feel like maybe the research orgs aren't quite right for what you're having.
That's right. I do think frequently I have kind of a sense of like something about this doesn't feel quite right. And a lot of the time, I do just believe that Silicon Valley has successfully developed like a lineage of a lot of matters. Like there's just like when I imagine, I haven't gone through YC, but I imagine that if I go through YC, there's just like, there's a few people I can talk to, but it's also very clear that just like a lot of people have tried, have been partners, or have been people who have been thinking about these kinds of problems for 2 to 3 decades, have more like sampled from like 100 to 200 perspectives. And I definitely am very confident that everyone around me is just making it up. I think very few people are like really tapping into like a longer lineage of like, and just like, this is kind of very obvious to me in the sense that like, I'm a huge fan of like a lot of like the Toyota method, lean startup type stuff. And like when like there's not a single other person, maybe besides you, that I actually like who's a CEO around us who feels to me like they get it. Like I'm like who, like I don't think Buck gets it. I don't feel like Beth gets lean startup type stuff at all. I don't think like CG gets just like I just like look around me and I'm like none of you get it. And I'm like maybe you have a different management philosophy or something, but it feels to me that I would really like to tap into a lineage that's like more exposed to that kind of stuff, because I think it's the most successful lineage in like the history of humanity for creating successful organizations. Um,
I think one person that comes to mind is like Steve Newman. I don't know if you have met him
that
or
makes so
talked to him.
much sense.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, somehow Steve Newman feels so chill.
He is.
He's just like,
Yeah. And it's top of mind because recently he was working with my wife, Rachel, on the Golden Gate Institute for the Curve. Steve and also Taryn, who's the CEO of that org.
Yeah.
Both are, I mean, now like very excited about AI safety related things, have lots of experience with like,
yeah, that sounds great. I should talk to them more.
I incidentally think probably a lot more people are going to be like that in that like they're, have worked like high powered, like
That's right. And
asset
are trying to do something about AI. And so I think, and then I'm pretty excited in as much as you can pull together a network of that. Like, I think it's going to be hard for you to compete with, the people who have been YC partners for 10 years. But I think it's not implausible to me that like when I look at the first cohort and I'm actually like, oh no, everyone who's building something here does actually feel to me like they could be good peers in navigating the situation. Not, I hope that you get many first-time founders, but also getting second or third-time founders, I think is like a thing.
Yeah, I don't quite know currently whether I should be angling for more like first time or more like second time founders. And yeah,
It's interesting.
I implicitly feel like, oh, like the terms that I can offer are going to be like embarrassing.
They're going to be quite tricky to be
for a
like,
second time.
well, I sold $100 million organization. They're like, do I want to take $100K for 10% of my company or something? It's like going to be pretty tricky. I mean, I wonder whether that's a strong argument for doing more variable terms. Like, a thing that's been very, I think it has, of course, helped YC enormously with negotiation to have standardized terms.
Sure.
But it's plausible to me that you are both in a somewhat more competitive market, and because like early singularity startup founder market is just like, it will include a lot more high powered people than I think like the early Silicon Valley market of just like, I think there will be a lot of people who like will be in strong negotiation positions. So it's plausible to me that for some of them you just want to like offer them, much better terms. It seems pretty tricky to navigate socially, and like it puts much more adversarial pressure on you.
Yeah. I really hate negotiating. But I'll think about it. I was like, hopefully, just one standard term, just like everyone, yeah. But yeah, I think like in fact YC does like for like very prestigious or like third time founder whatever offer like allow for different terms, but they don't advertise this.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
See, yeah, of course, they don't want the word getting out.
That's right.
And nobody at YC has told me this, so this is speculation. Yeah. One topic I'm kind of interested to hear your thoughts on is why work on funding something versus incubating something versus directly doing the thing yourself.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I've like I'm tentatively excited about this project for you, which I think is actually a huge, huge bar, because for years I've been on a like crusade against incubators. I've advised like I think 24 people just like, please don't start an incubator.
I see.
And like the usual thing, the reason why I'm saying that is because they're trying to incubate in a domain that they have not produced any valuable work themselves. I'm just like, I feel like when I'm thinking of things like the FLI Fellowship and stuff like that, like they were trying to get a bunch of people to do interesting AI for epistemics work, but they had never done any interesting AI for epistemics work themselves. And I'm just like, similarly, like I've seen research organizations be like, we want to make an incubator for like good research organizations that had never produced any interesting research themselves. And I'm just like I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's like very, very important, and I think this was in some sense also like the central like secret sauce of YC. Like it was an incubator by founders who had experience founding things.
Yeah.
But so I'm like, definitely one of the things is like, well, you should only ever consider starting an incubator after you've actually started one instance of the kind of thing that you want to incubate once. And so I'm just like, well, you got to start with building something yourself. I feel slightly better about being a funder instead of incubator.
Okay.
It's just like, it still seems very doomy to me. Like, so like, I'm like, can you fund work that you've never done yourself? I'm like, it's tricky, but it seems slightly less doomed to me, just because like you have a much less intense effect on like the culture of an organization, and like you're much less just like trying to in some sense tell people how to run an organization. When you're a funder, you can often become a huge bottleneck to the organization existing or stuff like that, but I think it's slightly more reasonable to get to the point where you can figure out how to make a binary decision on whether to fund something or not, using deference chains, using other people to ask them for advice and stuff like that. But yeah, I still am like, I don't know, I wouldn't do a funder if I never done good work in space either.
Yeah, I think so too.
The only reason why I feel comfortable moving into the funding space, and I've always been like a strong advocate for like as much as possible try to have funders who also have a double identity. like one of the things that I'm most excited about for both the existing S process and anything that I want to build is that like I want many of the recommenders to be people who just like work in the space and are actively connected to it. And like I don't really believe in professional grant makers as a role that benefits from specialization as opposed to is deeply harmed by the fact that you don't get to experience.
So this is like a pretty big critique of the whole like CG model, I would.
That's right. I mean, it's like I think, yeah, I don't think like professional grant maker is the right role. And the only thing that I think historically has kept CG on rails is the fact that like many of the people there at least actively publish their ideas, so that like they were like many of the people who are historically grant makers at CG were like part-time like cost prioritization researchers and then part-time grant maker. And I think that was kind of a balance that could work. But CG has completely stopped doing that. Like nobody at CG is, none of them run the kind of blog that like Holdenwood used to write or Joe Carl-Smith used to write and stuff like that.
I mostly like agree a lot with the this is why I still like regranting a lot. As concept regranting, we just give like kind of they're like like very, very small part-time grant makers and mostly just like doing their research or doing their like field building or whatever it is that they're really good at doing. And then if they find like good opportunities, they can just like put money towards that, but they'll still be like very grounded in the actual work of stuff. Yeah.
So I guess like answering your question, like how do you trade off? Well, just go and build something that actually like provides value that people would be willing to pay for, even if you're like in a nonprofit space. Like try to do something that's like somehow like you find a customer, whether it's like you can clearly demonstrate impact, or you can sell a concrete product to people, or you can do something that has any ability to like charge admission rates or anything like that in the space. And then after that, I would like consider maybe doing anything in the incubation space or the funder space. I do think the multipliers are enormous. It's like obviously the case that like YC has had a much big. I can't, unless they would have started a Frontier AI lab, which I guess Sam Altman did, so good job. But like it's very hard for me to imagine Paul Graham doing something that would have as much of an effect on like the world as starting YC. It's just like it should shape Silicon Valley like beyond what I think any startup could have realistically done.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like obviously often it's the right choice to work in infrastructure and stuff like that.
But I often get these. I don't know if you've been getting these, like kind of like very young, like undergrad people who've like recently seen like maybe Nan Ranselhoff's article on third wave philanthropy and been like, oh yeah, there's gonna be a lot of money. I should do something about this because they say that people should be doing something about this. And I'm like, you might not be the person who's well placed to do something about this, perhaps.
I mean, in some sense, I think they're well placed to do things that other people might want to pay for. But I think like, I mean, it's like don't try to start a private fund. That doesn't really seem to me like the right response to this situation.
Yeah, I mostly think, and again, I'm kind of like talking my book here, but I'm thinking like these people should start orgs, or start like projects that can take funding, perhaps if the projects do well. Because the kind of scarce thing when there's a lot of money is orgs, projects, people, good ideas. And so like doing that directly seems like more good than doing like a meta level stuff. And then the different consideration is even for you and me, right? Like we can do kind of these like infra level like meta stuff, or we can just like directly do a specific thing that I think is really good. And I don't know if you try to think about how to navigate that personally.
I mean, I'm just like especially for X risk.
Yeah.
Like there's a straw man that I think people have, and this is like I really don't get it, where like people are like, there's direct work on X. I'm like, what do you mean, man? I don't know what direct work on AI safety is. Like, do you mean research? I think the work that I have is a much shorter causal chain, like in making it like having good AI outcomes than like the people who are like trying to solve mathematical problems adjacent to AI safety. Because like they then need to tell a story. Like the story for the vast majority of AI safety researchers routes through the existence like platforms like LessWrong. Like how can LessWrong have a longer causal chain than the research? Like the research would have nowhere to go without an active field. The research would have nowhere to go without like these things. Like these are just like causal chains that I think are ultimately actually just shorter than the vast majority of what people conceptualize as direct work. And I just think like AI safety and AI existential risk is the kind of cursed problem where it's just like very hard to have anything that like feels like directly solving the problem. Sometimes people imagine that like, oh, if I'm at a lab, like my impact can come from directly solving the problem. But like that's really not the case. The vast majority of people at a lab will be like, oh man, the vast majority of my impact will come from the degree to which I'm creating a culture that is like less likely likely to deceive ourselves about the difficulty of the alignment problem, which will enable us to then advocate for policy changes at a crucial moment in time, which requires other people to be listening at the right time, to then be proposing the bill that can get enacted so we can get international cooperation to solve it. And you're like, yes, that's the same long causal chain as everyone else. Like, you're not going to like sit there at a lab and like, and I think people are so attracted to this idea that I think they like rationalize a huge amount of work as like being useful when I think it's basically useless. Like there's a huge amount of like very local alignment research where they're like, but I made the alignment benchmark go up. That must mean that I helped the problem. I solved the problem. And I'm like, look, man, I really don't think the action is in the alignment benchmarks. Like, I don't think that's the place where like that the alignment benchmarks aren't tracking the problem well enough. And that's really not where I think almost any of the likely failures of like this whole situation will come from. And I agree it can feel concrete and specific, but in as much as you're hoping to have your eyes on the ball, I don't think like there's a sense in which it's more direct to solve to work on a problem.
Interesting. Yeah. I guess I had like a very toy model of, oh yeah, like the technical AI safety researchers, that's direct work. And then the like field builders like you and me, maybe we're like doing the like meta work of helping these people. But
And I'm
yeah, I
like,
can see.
yeah, and I'm just like, no, the safety researchers rely on institutions like you and me to exist to even do their work. So like, there's at the very least we're at the same level of abstraction, and I would say that I'm placing myself much closer in terms of uncertainty. Like when I'm doing things, like I get to improve the quality of all the AI safety research at once. I get to take distributed bets. I get to like make changes that like pay off much more quickly than the average safety researcher. Like when I set up changes about like how content gets popular on LessWrong or the alignment forum or like various like UI improvements or stuff, like I get to see the differences in like how many people read that stuff and what its impact is, like at a scale of weeks relatively quickly. And they, a researcher will release a report every 6 months to 2 years, and they need to rely on there being infrastructure to publish that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Kind of on that note, one of the ideas that has been floating in the back of my head is like, better AI safety journal or something like that, which I think Alignment Forum is reasonable. I think LessWrong is very good. But neither of these things are like quite the thing yet.
I mean, I'm super excited. I'm just like, if I had more time, it would be at the top of my list of projects that I would want to do. I just like having good peer review, like some kind of peer review. Like we have to be clear, like LessWrong unambiguously has post-publication peer review in the sense that you publish your stuff and then everyone will tear it apart in the comments. And it is like much better at that than the vast majority of especially ML and AI academia peer review. Like it's just like the post-publication peer review is genuinely high quality peer review that tracks quality like to a really substantial degree. But the key thing is just like right now it relies on like a relatively fragile like social status game where like you can get reputation by publishing high upvoted comments, but the visibility of the comments is kind of mixed, and like you are building reputation but only among a relatively crowd who can really evaluate whether your comments are good. And having something that just like, no man, we're paying people money to do reviews of good work. And like that might be a lot of money because reviews of good work is like actually really valuable. And there's like a sense in which you can like, I would be hesitant to have people specialize as reviewers too much. Like I think going all the way to being a full-time reviewer would be an issue similar to my concerns about starting an incubator or funder. But I think getting to a point where you're a half-time reviewer and you like see it as a major part of your professional responsibility to review other people's work, I think is like definitely the place where I want to get and where the current field is like really falling quite flat.
Yeah.
And so like, would love something in that space. I've like thought a bunch of cool mechanism designs and ways to like do stuff like in that space, but I'm just like, but at the end of the day, it needs a lot of taste and a decent amount of communication and branding, and I'm just like fully booked out.
Yeah. I think the first person who comes to mind who, as a person who's like kind of doing this thing is like Zvi. I think a lot of what Zvi is doing is like, well, summarizing a bunch of things and giving his takes, but also like giving other people's takes.
I mean, I loved Rohin Shah's alignment newsletter. It was like great at the time when it happened.
Sorry, which one?
Rohin Shah's alignment newsletter.
Yeah.
And he ran for like 3 years before he went to DeepMind.
What's like one thing you admire about me and one thing you would criticize about me, and I'll do the reverse.
Yeah. I mean, definitely the key thing is just like, it's really like building good infrastructure is very hard. I'm just like, I think both Manafund and Manifold are just like two great pieces of infrastructure that I'm like very happy about existing. And I'm just like, those, I mean, and I already said the thing of like one of the few people who I like talk to, and I feel like you get like a lot of the things that like feel like very basic to me of just like, like PR FAQs, like you get feedback quickly, you fail fast, you like do painful things like more frequently, like a lot of these ideas about like trying to pull put yourself in touch with reality as much as possible at every step and point in time to like find whatever gradient is there. And it's like you feel like one of the few people who get that. Like while also, doing a pretty good job at like keeping like the big picture in mind, which like, I mean, yeah, there are many people in Silicon Valley. Most of the time when I talk to them, they then take that and they just apply it to like starting a company. They don't really apply it to like what are the most important problems in the world. I mean, the biggest criticism, of you tends to be like, I don't think I do just think that like there's something you're missing about like being careful around people. Like I think you're like very high on my list of like, God, I bet Austin is going to like this crazy sociopath.
Interesting.
And I don't know what it is. I think it might be related to like some of the way you relate to like the company stuff. Like there's a certain way where I'm like, I've been like trying really hard to like build a community with like norms that like somehow maintains like a certain kind of higher trust relationship with each other. And there's definitely a sense that I often have of like, I think you're trying to do something principled in a sense. Like I think clearly like you like have advocated principles of like radical transparency and various things like this. But I do think that like I do just think that like it has turned out to be, and I think my worldview has been reasonably well validated, even though I think we still have various disagreements and even how to interpret the evidence.
Sure.
But like I have long modeled the world as like if you're trying to do things around like shaping the trajectory of AI, it's just like very hard. Like a lot of your effort should go into figuring out whether you're helping or hurting. And it just like there's like if you don't assign substantial probability that you're making things worse, I think you're probably very wrong. It's just like it's a domain where just like the considerations are tricky and like the right ethical principles are crucially important. And I think you kind of have a very deep distaste for a certain kind of which clearly I'm sympathetic to, but my model of you has a deep distaste for a certain kind of what is the word I'm looking for? Scrupulosity that like consists like that like where people obsess about whether they're doing good for the world or causing harm for the world or something like that. That I think like I'm very sympathetic to, but I think you're taking like not necessarily too far, but just like you're not seeing a version of it that I actually think is like that is good. And I just think that like it is eminently possible to think about your role in the world and like realize that you have caused grave amounts of harm and to like use that to learn better and to have a culture of people who take that question really seriously. And often I'm a bit like, I don't know, man. I kind of really expect that if like you keep building lots and lots of infrastructure, like there will just end up being a lot of people who will make the world worse and you will fail to have a culture. And I think there's like an underlying thing here where I'm like, it's very, very tricky to have an ecosystem that does credit accounting in a way that is sensitive to like whether you made the world better or worse. If you already admitted and like have a substantial number of people who would be threatened by that becoming a fact about the ecosystem. Like if you're in a world where like there's a bunch of people who have made the world a lot worse, maybe because they started frontier companies and really didn't try very hard to be careful about this. I'm just like, yeah, at that point, those will form a very powerful and strong coalition to prevent anything that like could meaningfully create accountability or something like that. And so I'm definitely worried that like in as much as you want to like start an incubator like this or something, there's going to be a bunch of people who are just like going to make the world a lot worse, and it's going to make it very hard to have open conversations about that because those people will very rationally understand that like their standing in the ecosystem is going to be threatened, and as much as people can orient around this and talk about this, and that's going to be very tricky.
Okay. Thank you. I very much appreciate that.
Welcome. I mean,
I think you have many traits which I admire. Just one that I'm going to call out that I think people don't notice as much is that I think of you as being very kind of like service oriented. Trying to like help people. You like often get in the weeds of trying to like debug problems or fix things. Like personally, I was like the other day asking Lauren like who has stayed in the most rooms at Lighthaven, and she's like probably Aldi. Like he does this all the time. He kind of dog foods them. The dog fooding things I think is kind of related, and like part of it that like I think you care a lot about making things really good and like in the service of like serving people basically. So I think it's a beautiful attitude, and I would like to see more people adopt that.
I'm glad. Now hit me.
I think the thing where you got into a fight with like Scott Alexander this year, that seemed really dumb. Maybe you kind of agree.
It's the thing you need to understand. If you start endorsing destroying the world, something really bad has gone on. You need to maintain a culture in which people can talk about this stuff. And if somebody is like, how dare you attack these people who are carrying my banner? Aren't they trying to do good? How dare you even consider that maybe they're making the world a lot worse? I'm just like, no. Like, I cannot have a culture around me that like is trying to like protect the dignity of powerful people, because otherwise they will like be scared to contribute or whatever. Like, if we want to be morally serious, we need to maintain a strict degree. But I agree. I mean, it's tricky. I'm just like, how do you navigate this stuff? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm very confident that I don't know how to navigate it. I'm very confident, or like, I'm just like, I don't look at anyone who currently knows how to navigate it. I think this results, I'm just like solidly, I'm confident that I will look back at most of what I've done over the last few years in this domain and be like, I'm such a fucking idiot. The problem is I just don't know which of the directions it will see. Like, I'm like confident that there's like a lot of thrashing around when I'm trying to navigate a situation. Confident there's a lot of like thing that feels kind of being overly reactive to stuff, but also a confidence that just like, well, I really don't know in which direction is the right one to and how to navigate this. Where I'm just like, I'm confident. You know, I'm definitely not being consistent in a way where I like feel like I could behave this way if I had gotten the right answer. But I'm like, I think I'm getting feedback about which things like work, what the consequences of various attitudes in the space are, and like I expect I'll figure it out with slightly less dramatic, public fights. I mean, maybe, I don't know, public fights are a pretty good way of like having fights with people as they go.
I mean, some of my favorite like comments or writing from you have been like public fights, such as with the like coefficient giving thing. It really helped clarify like my understanding of the space, I think. And also at the same time, I guess, I think it's probably like good for you, your reputation, the projects you care about, to not be as that, just like known even more to be like a big person who fights a lot.
Yeah.
That's feedback I have. But yeah, maybe let's end on like a classic podcast question, which is like, how can people help you out with the projects that you're excited about, either the S process thing or something else?
Yeah. I mean, a big one is I'm just like, we finally now are in a position where I'm just like, we have financial stability to hire. I was like, okay, it's time to hire. I don't actually want to hire that much. I think historically we've been the slowest growing organization of like anything in the space, but I'm like, I think you might want to hire 3 people this year.
3 people?
3 people.
Wow.
But like, and as much as anyone else watching this, could be you, possibly. Yeah, I think that's the big one. And then I'm like, always, contribute to LessWrong, contribute to the intellectual commons.
Sure.
I think that is at the margin very, very highly undersupplied still.
But for the S process work, like funders to reach out to you?
Oh yeah, I mean, also like definitely like if you're a funder who's like it has been intrigued by anything I've been saying about like trying to make the grant making more trustless, making it possible to like get access to a huge amount of deal flow. Like now is a great time, like not only to potentially participate in the process, but also to like shape it. Like if you reach out to me now and are like, hey, I might be interested in distributing some money, you might be one of the dog-footed users who like, I will build a product around because you're my one source of feedback about how to do something good. And I think that's often like a quite amazing experience to have.
I can attest to that from experience, both like Lighthaven itself for like Manifest the first time around, and then also more recently Waypoint for also again Manifest.
We're just like, we have a gradient to optimize on, and that gradient might be you.
Cool. And then I guess I'll answer my own question. Some things that we're looking for, first and foremost, like just great founders. Either if you yourself are interested, or people, or you're like willing to like kind of help promote this thing a little bit. We should be launching very soon, and like let people know Surplus is a place you can go.
Oh yeah, I think you have never said Surplus so far.
Yes,
in this whole session.
It is called
the whole
Surplus.
name of the incubator that you're thinking about is Surplus.
Yes,
Surplus.dev was, I think, the URL you were considering.
That is correct, and that will probably be the official URL. Yes. But yeah, we are also kind of raising funding for Surplus at the time. So, I'm doing the math. It's like 100K per founder. So it's going to be like maybe like $1 to $2 million that we're trying to raise in total. Not that much money, I think, in the grand scheme of things. I don't have any of it like raised yet. I don't know if that's like an okay thing to say in public, but I'm like, I'm going to like empty my coffers to like make this thing like work if I have to, but I prefer not to.
But I mean, also like in as much as you were open to arrangements of like the donor advised fund nature,
yes.
Like it seems like somebody could come in, bring in $1 million, and then have basically a Manifund fund where like they they have that equity and then could potentially do something with it.
Yeah, so it could be equity, it could be loan, depending on what the considerations of the people are looking for. And I'm hoping that we have enough money flowing around the ecosystem that somebody will look at this and be like, yeah, this is exciting. I'm willing to pitch in like a few $100,000 or something like that. But yes, absolutely. And the third thing is kind of just possibly some people listening to this are the kinds of speakers that I would be excited to bring in to come in. You, Ollie, would be a great person to bring in at some point. Thank you. But yeah, other people who have started similar projects and maybe don't want to commit a bunch of their time, but would like to come in and give a talk. These people are what I'm looking for, and then also just general hiring as well. I guess we're also looking to hire 3-ish people pretty soon for the combination of Manifund and Mux and Manifest.
Yeah.
I kind of think the people who'd be good working at Lycon might also be good here. So it's a little bit
So don't it's much worse.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Austin.
This is a lot of fun.
Indeed.